Hello, and welcome once again. You're listening to the voice of Free Arcadia. And it's such a wonderful pleasure to be back again. We've gotten back on the saddle, so to speak. The last episode was wonderful reception. It was wonderful to dive into Space Pirate Captain Harlock. But now we want to shift away again from a series and just look at something more particular and more, but even more expanding in the Leijiverse. One of the most important figures in the Leijiverse, Maetel. And I don't think we could have two more informed people on the podcast to discuss the woman who travels through time than our two guests today. And I want to introduce them. Firstly, a brand new guest to the show, but not the first time on the channel, Ito. Ito, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. You are super informed on Maetel, like I've said before. Could you give the audience just a little more insight into your Leijiverse experience?
Yeah, sure. So I translated a few things by Leiji Matsumoto into French, and including manga series Galaxy Express 39. I'm also like a very active fan, and I'm the creator of Leijiverse.com, which is a website dedicated to all the adaptations based on Leiji Matsumoto's work. I'm always doing a few things. I recently created a VR experience about Galaxy Express 39 recreated in a VR space that you can visit if you've got like a VR headset. So yeah, that's about me.
Yeah, if you are subscribed to the Leijiverse YouTube channel, our Leijiverse YouTube channel, you just saw a video of the VR experience that Ito created, where you get to journey through the space train, the legendary space train, and it's a wonderful experience. People thought that was really cool. We both rep that Leijiverse name. We've talked about it before. There's no beef. It's been squashed. Go watch the interview we had with Ito to get an even deeper knowledge of how he's contributed to the Leijiverse. And again, our very trustworthy member of the panel, somebody who's always coming with that really spicy info, and the creator of triple-9.fr, a website I reference weekly, if not daily, Julien Pirou. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you also for having me again.
I always get the nervous excitement building up to these episodes, and in addition to the excitement, there's an opportunity for me to learn today, because while Maetel is not something I'm completely ignorant to, I haven't taken a super deep dive into her character. I've got a lot of speculation, and I think we're going to clear a lot of that up today. Maetel, a very distinct character, and to let you all know, her first appearance is in Galaxy Express 39, a landmark series in Japan and for anime in general. And I wanted to start out here with a quote by her creator, Leiji Matsumoto. And bear with me. Maetel is the woman who travels with an adolescent boy's dreams. She's traveled with millions, tens of millions of boys so far. In fact, there are as many Maetels as there are boys. So maybe we're talking hundreds of billions or trillions. That's also how she can show up in any story. All boys have met Maetel in different forms of encounter. That goes for Antares or Emeraldus or Hardluck as well. They are all crossed over, and they can all be separate stories on their own. So if you change perspectives, you can make as many stories as you like. The characters of Shadow and Emeraldus, who were girls in their adolescence, have met someone called Maetel in the heart from their childhood or during the time when they were full of dreams. It's a train ride through one's mind, or the train that travels along with one. And each person has a different journey. That was from Anime Interviews, the first 5 years of Animerica, the anime and manga monthly magazine. So I think that's a really powerful way to describe who Maetel is, if not a bit of a nebulous one.
I think this description really reflects what, for me, like the most important characteristic of this character is like the mystery that like surround her, and like, is she immortal? Is she mechanic? Is she where is, there's a lot of questions, actually much more questions than there are answers. If you read all of Galaxy Express 39, you're still left with a lot of things unanswered. So for me, that's what I take away from this text.
Yeah, very open-ended mystery. One of the most open-ended, probably, I guess, the defining open-ended mystery in the Leijiverse.
There was on a website an analysis of Matsumoto's work in English. Forgot who wrote it. I shared it on the 999 Facebook page.
Okay, I got to look at that.
The writer at this point, which really is goes into that direction, saying that in other works, when there's contradictions between how a character is depicted, it weakens the character. But in the Leijiverse, it's actually the opposite. All these contradictions sort of gives them this mythical aspect. Harlock is a myth more than a man, and Maetel is a myth more than a woman. And I in this quote, I feel like Leiji is very aware of that and is really playing into that.
Yeah, they, like a Greek god, they're these omnipotent, immortal beings, but they still have all this human drama occurring around them. So am I too far off the base by kind of echoing a part of what you've said there?
No, I think that's really something you find in the works of Leiji Matsumoto in general. Is that you have this mythical dimension, and these characters are archetypes in a way more than actual character with a clear life when he was born in that year and so on. When Matsumoto wants someone to embody the dreams of youth, also the sort of innocent love of the young people and so on, then you have Maetel showing up aboard a train usually. And taking you on this journey, and this the journey to becoming an adult. And so, we are more in the sort of metaphor in a way. But at the same time, because we are humans, we want to find a sort of logical story. And sometimes Matsumoto is not the easiest writer. Get a logical story at the end, but you would sort of get this higher level myth, which is no small feat.
Yeah, well, we also learned that Maetel isn't just taking boys to become men. They can also become something else. And I think we're going to get into that and maybe the devious nature of her journeys or travels that she takes these boys on. But also, we get to see Maetel throughout her life. And you do get to see some sort of growth and change and different, and maybe in a different way, you could explain away these contradictions by, we contradict ourselves in our youth, right? You should not be the same person you are at 35 as you were at 25, as you were at 15, at 5. So we get to see that a bit, and we're going to dive into that a bit more. But like I said at the top, she's best known for her appearance in Galaxy Express 39, the manga, the series, and the movie. And her physical appearance, let's talk about that. Tall, skinny, blonde. Actually, in one of the manga covers, I think it's one of the first Galaxy Express 39 manga covers, where her hair is transparent completely and it's blue because of the starry background. I never see him really do this effect quite. It's very distinct because it's like, was Maetel originally blue-haired? What was the idea there? It's a very interesting composition. Maybe wasn't sure if she was blonde. I don't know. Any insight? Do you know the cover I'm talking about?
At least in Matsumoto's mind, I'm pretty sure Maetel, like many of his female characters, was always blonde because he has a thing for blondes. And I think we will talk about that. And
maybe redheads. Maybe redheads too, by the way.
And that's something you see actually a lot when there's a mangaka does a cover, volume of manga, tankobon. They use the opportunity sometimes to try something, try different colors, and try to go into sort of more illustrative kind of style, which is, I think, what happened there. He was playing with colors, and we should not probably. I mean, you never know with Leiji, but we probably should not take that as a sort of statement.
And on the appearance, what I think is interesting is there's always the contrast between Maetel and whoever is her counterpart. So usually like Tetsuro this also, depending on the series, the other character that accompany. And usually, like, there's a huge contrast between this character, which really tall, she's pretty, she's, thin, and then there is like the boy that's like usually small and ugly and dirty and doesn't like to take baths. I think it's also interesting because it creates a dynamic between the main characters in the movie, in whatever series.
Yeah, she definitely sort of size-wise dominates her counterpart there, and that's true of many Leijiverse starring leading ladies. Emeraldus has that happen in her OVA. The dynamic is generally there. She also wears most recognizably, she wears a black fur coat with let's see if I can pronounce this right. A kubanka? I got this off of your website, Julien, so stop me if I'm wrong. This is a very sort of widow-like appearance, right? This is the mourning widow archetype that we're seeing being echoed here. Now, any thoughts on the widowhood of Maetel and maybe what that is trying to communicate more specifically?
There's clearly there's something of mourning associated with Maetel. It's one of the mysteries. When they go on Pluto, where there's these bodies in the ice, who is she crying for? Who is there? Who has she lost? Turns out a lot of people. So yeah, you always have this sort of gravity, no pun intended, to Maetel. A strong contrast with her companion, so Tetsuro, for instance, who is very much looking forward to an eternal life. So it's contrasted with this character who sort of wear the weight of death on her, the weight of losing people in her clothes. So
would it be too far off base to say Grim Reaper?
I'm having a strange, deja vu feeling because little anecdote is that a long time ago, Edo and myself, we were recording video commentary for the Galaxy Express movie, for the French DVD. I was 18 at the time, so that was long ago. And one thing I had, it was really a sort of theory I had at the time, was there was a connection maybe with Maetel and the sort of almost sort of Celtic vibe of these otherworldly women, almost elvish in a way, that embody a lot of different things, but you could maybe have some kind of parallel with all the stories of the Holy Grail, which also is a symbol of immortality and youth and rejuvenation. I had a lot of strong ideas because I was very young myself as well.
You were newer to the universe, like myself, as I'm still pretty new, to be frank with you. But if you watch me talking a year ago or 2 years ago, even my progress might be a little bit more rapid because I'm an old man now. But I had that same sort of speculation and enthusiasm. I'd love to hear all those theories too. I still think they're juicy, so I will never lose my love of speculation. But I totally understand where you were at that time,
and that's something actually you can. And I think probably more than the Celtic aspect is a sort of more Germanic side of things, because we know Leiji is a big fan of Ring of the Nibelung and all this sort of opera. Maetel, in some way, is a Valkyrie. She's taking these young warriors to the afterlife through space. And I'm pretty sure that's something he had in mind, maybe not in sort of literal way.
You almost wonder, like, could you write the fan theory that Tetsuro died during the police chase at the beginning of the movie, of the 3-9 movie, and him finding Maetel's, he ascends the stairs, and this is a climb to heaven, and he meets God, and but the afterlife is not the end, and you could really go off in a lot of crazy ways with what you're saying there.
And there's I don't know what the English official name, the Gingatetsudo no Yoru, which was probably an inspiration for Matsumoto, where the train is literally taking you to the afterlife.
It's a ghost train as well, right? I mean, that's the, yeah. Ito, anything else to add with the widow?
Yes, I think it's also the black is a symbol of the sadness. Is like, I mean, when you think of Maetel, the first emotion that you think of is sadness. What I've got in mind is like at the end of the first movie, sorry if it's going to be a bit of spoiler here, but at the end of first movie, when she is about to betray Prometheum, a mother, the mother said, "Oh, how can you betray me who give you eternal life?" And then she replies, Maetel replies, "And eternal sadness." And for me, that's very much like I couldn't imagine a character with wearing colorful clothes and being able to display sadness in this way. I think it would be like it wouldn't work together. But the black really underline and highlight this emotion.
She's also got, let's talk a little bit about the fun stuff, the gear, right, of this character. That's something we don't get to talk a lot about in the Leijiverse too, because it's always drenched in all these themes, but they got some pretty sweet gear. They've got this pendant, which ends up being very important because it's a communicator, and a communicator with a very interesting character. Maybe we'll dive into that a bit more in a bit. She's got this suitcase too. Now, the suitcase symbology, it does make some sense, but I don't have any deep insight into the suitcase. Do either of you?
Yeah, I mean, the suitcase for me is like all the, it's like the unconscious part of like when people say, emotional baggage or like because somebody is having baggages, like means like they've got deep things that are completely repressed deep down inside into their unconscious. And I think that the suitcase is a bit of a symbol of that. And one thing that stands out to me and about the suitcase is the second series of manga of Galaxy Express 39, the second part that Matsumoto started rewriting from 97. I think it's volume 15 and onward. There is a scene at one point, I think it's probably in the first volume of this follow-up. There's somebody who's like open the suitcase and then they see something, but like we don't see what's inside it, but the character see what's inside it, and then I can't remember exactly what happened.
Pulp Fiction?
Really?
Are you also? Could also be Pulp Fiction? You remember when they open the briefcase in Pulp Fiction at the end?
Actually, I have to say I've not seen Pulp Fiction.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's they begin the movie with a heist and they end the movie with the conclusion of the heist, and there's this suitcase that's being, I don't know if that may be getting too deep into it, but there's something Holy Grail-ish. I think Holy Grail would be a good way to describe it, to tie it back into what Julien was saying there. So maybe there's something to that as well.
I'm thinking as well as for people who are always on the road, always traveling, basically their whole life should fit into a suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, that tells you something about Maetel, that she doesn't really have a home. She doesn't have really a place to return to. What she is that suitcase. That's her whole existence there. You could also go, if you want to, in sort of darker direction, have a sort of, it's like the devil carrying a suitcase full of souls in some way, if you want to see Maetel in this sort of darker light.
Yeah, maybe if it was blues instead of jazz for the soundtrack, she'd have a guitar. But there is a sort of a guitar and a kiter in End of Galaxy Express 39, the first movie, but that's for another episode there. And it also reaffirms the nature of the vagabonds, right? These two are vagabond characters. We have three kind of archetypal stories in the Leijiverse that I've noticed, and that's the military drama of Yamato, that's the pirate gang of Hardluck, and that's the vagabonds of Galaxy Express 39. Now, maybe Queen Melania fits in somewhere else that I don't recognize, but they have a bit of a vagabond feel to them too. So that's just how I perceive it. The Blitz Whip. Now, the Blitz Whip is what I have the least experience with, because I have not watched all 113 episodes of Galaxy Express 39.
So one thing before, we see Maetel fighting, but it's actually very, very rare. So it's probably only in a handful of episodes, and including...
There's a good gif of her just whipping Shadow, I think. Yeah. And it's got that, what the internet might call Dommy Mommy vibes, if we're getting in that direction. Sorry, go on.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly what you're referring to. But TV special with Queen Emeraldas and the episodes of a TV series with Queen Emeraldas is part of a, has got like a few section when she actually fights. But like for me, the whip, it's like I couldn't think of a more appropriate weapon for Maetel, because it's like something that you can use at a distance, and it's very elegant, and it's almost like, I'm not going to get too close.
It has a sort of Western feel as well, and I mean, in the Leijiverse, 1 out of 2 planets turn out to be some kind of Far West planet. Yeah. So her having a whip is like, maybe that's actually a very common thing, and many people carry whips. We just don't know about them.
And like you said, Ito, it's a more elegant weapon, and Maetel being of the Leijiverse 4, right? I mean, if maybe the 5th is the boy character, but you have the solid 4 being Hardluck, Totoro, Emeraldus, Maetel. And Maetel representing the most feminine of this cast. She does get a weapon that's a little bit more befitting of the elegance of that feminine approach. So, but it's not to be trifled with, because it can destroy a 30 centimeter thick wall, grasp objects from afar, and apparently she can like straighten it out and use it as a rapier as well, which was something I was not aware of. But doubling that up, she's also appeared with a gravity saber, and apparently Totoro gave her a Cosmo Dragoon as well, which maybe used even a little bit less there. So,
on the topic of the pendant, I think it's Matsumoto is not the most, let's say, plot-driven writer. Right? You always feel that he's making the stuff as he progresses through the story. He doesn't have all the answers at the beginning, but the pendant appears very early in the story. There's a proper payoff to that pendant at the end of the journey, which is not always the case with Matsumoto. He tends to forget stuff along the way. But here, it's one example where the pendant turns out to be pretty important, which is
it's a character.
Cool. Yeah,
it's a character. Let's just get into it. It's Maetel's father has been put in there. He's been mechanized there. Hey, if you didn't get it by now, we're talking about a decades-old anime. So, spoiler alert, I guess. That's just how the Free Arcadia podcasts go. He's leading her on a journey, and through different variations, we get different approaches of Maetel too. So maybe we'll talk about that more granularly, how she handles her responsibilities in different incarnations. It's sort of her guide, and at Suji-chan in chat on Twitch, by the way, we stream these at twitch.tv/Captain Hardluck. She has a compact, which another very feminine product, but turned into a mind reading device, at least in the movies. I don't know if she uses that in any other. I don't know if she uses that in the anime. I didn't think so. So she's capable of reading people's dreams. She's capable of infiltrating dreams. That makes me think maybe there's something there too thematically.
Well, she's said to be sort of the dreams of young people, so that she has dream-related powers is not such a stretch. It's a bag of holding, sorry, a role-playing reference, but anything the plot needs can be found in that suitcase.
But let's move on to those themes more specifically. And right off the top, she's the facilitator of dreams. She offers Tetsuro the ticket to get on the Galaxy Express 39, the space train, to get a machine body, because he wants that to claim eternal life, as was the goal of his past mother, and the father being MIA.
She seems like, it's too good to be true, because like she's a beautiful woman, and she offers a promise to make Tetsuro's dream come true, even though it wouldn't have enough of a lifetime of work to be able to afford a ticket on the Galaxy Express. And then the only condition is like, don't ask me. Maetel says, Tetsuro, don't ask me anything about my journey or why I'm doing this. And it feels like, it's like almost too good a deal to pass on.
Don't ask no questions. I won't tell you no lies. It goes into that very sort of mythological aspect as well. It's like don't look back when you go out of hell, or
Sodom and Gomorrah, which. Where Noah leaves with his friend, and the towns are being destroyed behind them, and God says, don't look back. And the wife of Lot looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. So I don't know if that's ever brought, I always have the Bible stuff on hand, man. But yeah, it's really interesting. And women and dreams too, and the dreams of boys, and maybe lustful dreams as well. And you can see Maetel as a representation, perhaps, of a young Matsumoto's lustful dreams. She wouldn't be the first female character to represent those, but maybe the first in such a strong mythological context.
It's more than a dream. It's I think for me, it reminds me of like in myth and legends, like the figure of Aladdin's lamp, like the genie in the bottle, like that's going to grant exactly, that's going to grant a wish, but like there's always a catch, actually. That's the thing. And it's in Galaxy Express 39, we don't really know what the catch is until the very end.
And he's definitely, Tetsuro's a bit monkey pod in this journey the whole way. When the monkey puts their hand in the jar and can't pull it out because they want the thing so badly, Tetsuro's got his hand in that jar 99.9% of the series. And I think this segues nicely into the next topic, untrustworthy women. I don't think this is something that is glossed over in the Leijiverse. This is his breakthrough manga, Adako Oiden, is every episode, instead of being Planet of the Week, it's almost Woman of the Week in that manga, from what I understand. And it's a constant series of being misled or the truth isn't necessarily, they're not being lied to necessarily, but they don't know the full truth generally until the end. And the main character is made to be a punchline.
I think that's something you see a lot in Matsumoto and his short stories as well. We have a couple of collections that's been released in French, so we had a chance to dive into these short stories, where you usually have this woman who has a sort of the master plan, and men, in comparison, are very, very naive, very love-struck, or don't think very much. And it creates also a bit of comedy because men are a bit dumb, and you can feel that Matsumoto sort of acknowledges that he may not be the smartest guy when it comes to his interaction with women. But one thing that really strikes me is that these women are never really depicted as villains per se. They are doing what they need, what they have to do to ensure their future, to ensure their survival, to ensure that they get what they want, that their dreams, they can reach their dreams. And sometimes that means, not being entirely truthful with men. But men are basically running into the trap in some way. So you cannot really feel completely, you don't feel bad for them in this sense.
To harken back to Hardluck, he does the same thing, but instead of, you don't see the hormones leading him as much as it is a code of honor and in that manhood. And maybe we could see there's a transition that men have to go through from their hormones turning into honor. And what that really means. What does that journey look like? And Tetsuro goes on that journey, and Maetel is his training partner in that, in a lot of ways. It's interesting because Matsumoto begins his career in shoujo manga. And when he started making shoujo manga, he's quoted as saying something along the lines of, I didn't even know how women put their underwear on, right? He didn't know anything about women when he was starting his career. And he goes deep into this shoujo experience, meets Miyako Maki, one of the shoujo artists of that time period. And he learns everything about a woman through this experience. And, 15, 20 years after his start, he's finally, he crafts this super iconic female character that isn't like a counterpart to Hardluck. She's her own sort of thing. She might be based on those sort of earlier Sexoroid, Barbarella things. And we'll get more into the inspiration, but it seems like this is his statement on women, like a really super informed statement on the feminine wiles, so to speak, versus the male hormones.
Yeah, so I would like to add a couple of things here. So the first thing about starting a career in drawing shoujo manga is actually something was pretty common back in the days. Most of big mangaka of that time did that.
Shoujo was the thing throughout the 60s, right?
Yeah, well,
Huge
I think I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe because it was seen as the minor way to get started as a mangaka. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's the reason. I don't know. But I think what's very interesting what you said is it didn't really understand women, and I think there's a lot of that in the character of Maetel. Because if you think of that, the fact that she's very mysterious, and the other main character is a boy, I think it's really the symbol of lack of co-understanding between men and male and female, and how communicate between genders, and I think that's all what Maetel is about.
One thing also, if you make a parallel with Matsumoto's life, is that he basically came to Tokyo from Kyushu. So it's basically the country boy coming to the big city. And I think it struck him how women in Tokyo were so different. And I think they were, in a way, too sophisticated for him when he arrived. And I think that's something you can see in his work. And in Otoko Oidon, who is a bit of a mirror to Matsumoto's own youth. Maybe not exact anecdotes, but the sort of feeling of being the country boy coming in the big city, having no idea how to interact of the social cue and the romantic cues, and you're a bit lost in there and messing up things all the time.
Yeah. Was I too off base on that statement about shoujo in the 60s, Julien? Or do you know what I'm saying? I believe it had a kind of big burst at that time period. Am I off base?
Yeah, for sure. Like Edo said, a lot of mangaka, male mangaka, were working in shoujo at the time. You see a sort of shift during the 60s where more and more women actually start writing stories for women, which is I think better in the long run.
Right.
At least there's better understanding. Matsumoto very quickly started doing animal stories, because at least a little dog, a little cat is easier to write than a little girl. But it was an entry point, for a lot of artists, because I think, I don't have numbers or anything, but I think there was clearly a big market for women reading at home probably, and writing, buying magazines and so on. And so, there was demand for manga for women. But early on, manga were mostly drawn by men. So there was this sort of period where it was a bit awkward.
That makes sense. And you can see Matsumoto develop his shoujo style, adapting more of that Tezuka approach, and being really inspired by his future wife, Miyako Maki, who, like I said, extreme shoujo force there. Let's move that on, though, to the next. We're talking about learning about women. Well, who are some of the most important people in young boys learning about women? That's mothers. And we see here through Maetel and her stories, the contradiction of the good mother versus the bad mother, and what really defines either of those. In Galaxy Express 39, the movie, we have Totaro's mother, who represents the good mother. This is the mother who bears, this is an endless archetype. And again, you could take it back to the Mother Mary, right? She accepts her fate of creating new life and then having to let it go, but doing best by that life, regardless of the pain it inflicts on herself. This is just a general pain with parenthood, but they call it maternal instinct for a reason, versus Maetel's mother, who is what we would say is the kind of bad mother, maybe the all-consuming mother. And you could take that quite literally. She's trying to consume the entire universe by mechanizing it and sort of linking it up with her mainframe. Thoughts on good or bad mother, Ito?
Yeah, I want to say, I want to add a bit of nuance to what you said about Maetel's mother. So definitely she is what you're saying, but she actually we can see her as somebody who's been corrupted by the mechanization, because she used to be a very kind and loving mother. If you watch, Metal Legend and also Space Symphony Metal, you definitely see that aspect of Prometheum, where she was very loving. And even Maetel, she still keeps these kind memories of a mother. And what comes to my mind now is in the last movie, Galaxy Quest 39, Eternal Fantasy, there is an insert song called Mother, and it's sung by opera singer. It's this scene when Maetel is in the observation platform at the end of the 39, and the train goes through Pluto, and this song is really much reflects the state of mind of Maetel and what she thinks, and the lyrics says things like a mother, a noble person. Well, I'm not going to translate the song right now, but it's very much it's for me it's one of the strongest moments of this movie. It's the extremely moving part of it.
And if you see at the end of the second movie, Adieu Galaxy Express, there's this scene where basically all is left of Prometheum is this sort of pod that's basically dying, and Maetel is devastated. She cradles the pod and saying. She fought all she could, but she was alone in the universe, and she did what she had to do, and so you can feel that despite everything, Maetel wants to remember her mother as she was, and not as the creature she became. Yeah. So as Edo said, even then, before you had all the Queen Millennia connections and so on, you get the sense that once Prometheum was a nice person, probably, and in a way, Maetel going against her, it's an act of mercy. He wants to end her mother's struggle and suffering and descent into this madness, basically.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could even echo a story of watching a mother or go through dementia or something of that nature, watching your own parents corrupt their health and maybe the dangers. Again, Galaxy Express 39 to me is the story of the cost of freedom is death. And maybe that's every Leijiverse in my mind. And if the longer you prolong it, the less human you become. And at least unnaturally so, right? There's no problem with living a long life, but to what cost? And I'll also say that Maetel is going on a journey as well. As Tetsuro learns how to become a man, Maetel learns how to become a mother. And so we see her seeing all these examples and learning in her own way, just as Tetsuro does in these Planet of the Week stories.
Sorry, I just realized that I'm wearing my Sailor Moon T-shirt and I'm drinking tea from my Sailor Moon mug. So if you're just catching up on this live stream, this is not the Sailor Moon podcast. This is definitely about Leiji Matsumoto. Just want to make that clear.
Tuxedo mask directly inspired by Captain Harlock.
There is something actually. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty Guardian Maetel.
Okay.
Sailor Maetel.
Well, Queen Millennia, the anime, seems to be a bit of a magical girl thing as well, but that's for another episode. And then Oedipal Complex. I mean, this is the stickiest wicket of Galaxy Express 39. We're going to have to talk about it. The most infamous screenshot you could probably pull up from all of Maetel's appearances is her deep kiss with Tetsuro at the end of the first movie. Obviously they're not blood related, but then in the movie specifically, Maetel has the body of Tetsuro's mother. This is only in the movie, from what I understand, but there's obviously a point being made. Do either of you dare to approach this sticky wicket?
I think what we could spend some time discussing is at the crux of this question is like, what's the relationship between Maetel and Tetsuro? Because is it really a relationship of like support, or is it like a love relationship? It's really hard to explain. I know in the series there is very often the threat of them being left stranded on the planet because the 39 they can't make it on time for the departure of the 39. And there's also like at some point it almost feels like a compelling alternative for Tetsuro to spend the rest of his life living with Maetel. Yeah, is it really a love relationship, or is it just like a strong, I don't know. For me, that's like very much what the question is about. And I don't think there is a strong and clear definitive answer anywhere in the manga series or the TV series or
open-ended.
In the novels, the Ultimate Journey novels that were published and that kind of end the story, or offer one end to the story. They're going really for the sort of Maetel and Tetsuro are in love, which I'm not the part I like the most, to be honest. But because for me, you really have this feeling, and I like the sort of final scene of Adieu Galaxy Express, where Maetel stays on La Metal, and the train leaves, and Tetsuro sort of turns back, and you have this expression of maturity, basically, and that's for me, that's really a beautiful moment in the animation of showing that at that point he understands that he has to let her go. He has to grow beyond Maetel, basically, and she was this part of this journey, this sort of first childish love, which was kind of still based on his mother, and so in parts was rooted in a trauma as well, you could say. And he has to let her go and become the narration says it. I mean, again, because it says it already in the first movie, but now the boy has become a man. And that it's interesting that it happens at this moment. Not when Tetsuro defeats Faust, not in all these moments. It happens at the moment where he let go of that first love. That's when he grows into an adult, basically.
Letting go,
and I find that very beautiful.
Yeah, letting go is the hallmark of maturity. And the ultimate maturity being the letting go of life itself. But I will backtrack to the Oedipal thing a little bit more because, I mean, this is obviously Oedipus, right? So we have that story that we're drawing from. And what is the warning of the story of Oedipus? And the warning, I think, being, maybe you could get really granular with it. And it's like, hey, comic book nerds, get out of your parents' house, go do your own thing. It's time to grow up. This is growing up, letting go of your mother, letting go of the comfort and safety of home. And, if you want to go Freudian with it, you can. You can speculate either way. Is there the deep-rooted, attraction towards a mother? That's a nitty-gritty topic. It's hard to talk about it without looking like a weirdo, but it very well could be a strong impulse in just human nature, the gravity towards a mother. And at a point, you have to cut that off very clearly. And it doesn't have to manifest in a deep romantic kiss. Okay, people hold on to their mothers far too long. In many instances, there's many people who are mentally afflicted by their mother and that all-consuming nature, the mother's bad mother, for lack of a better term, maybe the corrupted mother's tendency to absorb the child. And there's a necessity to reject that.
I think I remember a quote by Wagner. Julien earlier mentioned the Ring of Nibelung, and I think Wagner said I think he was kind of obsessed with the myth of Oedipus, and he said like it's pretty much like sorry, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said it's pretty much like the foundation of the Western civilization. This myth, and it's like any myth is somehow a reinterpretation of this original fundamental myth.
And it's interesting because Maetel herself is in this sort of for her it's more Electra than Oedipus, but
it's breaking
with her father to defeat her mother. So there's also this sort of psychoanalytic thing going on.
It's breaking the familial pattern as well, which Tetsuro could be doing as well. The mother is he inherits the desire to become a machine person. He's not born with that. He was told stories by his mother his whole life, and his mother eventually gives up her life for him. But that doesn't mean that she was doing everything right. They were outside in the barren winter, with no shoes on this, what would ultimately be a fruitless quest. So it ended up working out for Tetsuro, but definitely not for her. She paid the price for sending him on that quest. He learned the lesson.
Something that Matsumoto talks about in his autobiography, he grew up in a very poor household, and one of his sisters died in some accident. I don't think he actually goes into details what exactly, but he's
accident, I think.
He's just saying that it happened because they were poor. And
she died. She couldn't get a procedure because they couldn't afford it. Yeah.
And so if you can probably see also an echo of that in Tetsuro living in poverty outside of the big city and losing his mother, like his family is suffering for it, and he has to go and make a living, basically, which is what Matsumoto did, and took the train from Kyushu to Tokyo. And so I think in this sort of starting point, it's a sort of very dramatized version of Matsumoto's own reasons for going on this journey.
Mm-hmm. And so there's the thrill of the hunt in that, right? And she in herself sort of represents an elusive prey. To put the male-female dichotomy in a very basic term, the man is on the hunt for the woman. The woman is the elusive target, and the man struggles to learn the ways of the target and to be better suited to, now that may be a very violent analogy, and it's not 100% in line, but there's some ringing truth to it. The elusive, you said she's kind of elvish. Elves are kind of sort of like deer or fawn in a way. They have like pointed ears, and you get that sort of woodland creature elusive vibe with Maetel. And she's wearing the black fur coat, so she's coated in fur. And I'm just making this all up as I go, but it seems to be strengthening.
It's not something that I personally felt in Galaxy Express, but that doesn't mean it's not there. As we know, everybody sees different things. One thing that I think is that there's clearly a sort of fascination of Tetsuro for Maetel, and she kind of wants to find out who she is and understand her, and in some way it blinds him to the other potential love interests around him. I think there's probably, if she didn't die at least, there would have been maybe a very much healthier love story between Tetsuro and Claire, the glass girl.
He rejects more available opportunities in preference for the elusive target.
The mysterious one has basically captivated him entirely in some way.
Like Moby Dick in a way, but black instead of white, I guess. I don't know. We touched on depression a little bit here, but depression is a very thick theme with Maetel, and dealing with depression, maybe more so the maternal depression of that letting go and knowing the foreboding. I mean, that's a parental inclination too. There's a sort of foreboding, your kid turns 13 and you start thinking about college, things of that nature. Thoughts on depression? I'm sorry,
it's
what was
it?
It?
Quite depression, but it's a sort of inherent tragedy of existence that she embodies.
Existential.
Yeah, it's like melancholia is like, the old-fashioned term for depression. It sounds a bit like that.
And that brings up, from Matsumoto's perspective again, I always get this feeling that he thought he was going to die young. I mean, I get that in a lot of his work, and this sort of impending death. And if you're going to go down, you go down in the blaze of glory. Maybe his sister did that to him a little bit. Maybe his struggle to establish himself in his youth and coming out of that. And everybody in Japan was dealing with that a lot. He was probably surrounded by death all the time growing up, not like his father, but within his community, sickness, illness, things of this nature. And we see that in the slums of Earth in many representations there. So there might be that when you bring it to that level, that existential dread that, I'm going to die. How do I balance my life? How do I not always be the gun-ho? And how do I not always be in this stuck, miserable state of existentialism? And finding the balance between and I guess you see both kind of represented in Tetsuro and Maetel, and they sort of complement and balance each other in that way.
And you can see this in the sort of symbol of the train itself, because even if it's going through space, but still it is on a specific journey. It's taking you to one place. You have no real control about where you're going. It's fate, really. And at some point, basically, Tetsuro, in some ways, the final lesson is that at some point you need to get off the train. At some point you need to find your own way, do your own thing, carve your own journey, and you cannot just be a sort of passive traveler on this train. You have to go out. You have to make a place for yourself.
Right. He does highlight the value in the vagabond's journey, but he also highlights how it can be pathologized as well. That endless floating. I'm going to move on then to the theme of royal responsibility that is upon Maetel, and you don't understand it pretty much until the end of Galaxy Express 39. But throughout the rest of her incarnations, it's one of the most prevalent themes that she deals with as she ascends into queendom or queenhood. Thoughts about her royal responsibilities as sort of the queen of the galaxy in many ways.
I think what's very interesting here is usually there is a tension between responsibilities and the feelings and emotion that she feels. And actually, now that I think of that, it's actually quite common. It's something that's already in Queen Millennia, where she's supposed to be on Earth.
Alien God Emperor, alien God Emperor of Earth, yeah.
Yeah, and she was not supposed to feel compassion and empathy for humans. And it's the same for Maetel. She fulfills her duty faithfully, actually. She's very diligent with that. But at the same time, she's conflicted because she feels sadness, because she knows that she's taking these young boys to a certain stage that is not what they want.
Many royals would, I think we have this idea that all kings and queens and people of leadership throughout all time were completely devoid of any empathy whatsoever. But I think there have at least been a few good leaders in human history who try to hold on to the empathy, right? But again, you have to balance that empathy from a position of leadership with the brutal task that is assigned to you to assign others to their doom. And we could also see this in Matsumoto's father, who worked as a commander in Japanese era military, for lack of a better word, sent men to their deaths as well. So it's a very complicated position to be in power. But within that royalty, right, we know about dysfunctional families. And we've talked a bit about this, the relationship between Maetel and her mother. But I did have a few points I wanted to go on that we hadn't brought up. Not just standing up to the tyrannical parents, right? Maybe the leaders that have lost their empathy, right? And they stopped doing that internal battle and they've just given in to one side of the responsibility. But then we also have Maetel and Emeraldus are sisters, and they mirror Prometheum, Queen Millennia, and Selene, her sisters there, history repeating across generations. Queen Millennia is probably when Leiji Matsumoto decided that Maetel and Emeraldus were sisters, or well, I may be off base there, but any other thoughts on the dysfunctional family, maybe going a little deeper into Emeraldus as well and bring her into the conversation?
In Galaxy Express, before it was made official that Maetel and Emeraldus were sisters, you knew that they knew each other, there was sort of rivalry going on. They were frenemies in a way, sometimes friendly, sometimes a bit antagonistic. You could feel there was a lot of history there, but you never knew what exactly. And in the first movie, I think that's probably the first hint that Emeraldus has a sort of personal stake in the end of Prometheum, beyond the death of Toshiro. When she attacks the Prometheum planet at the end, she has this very vicious look on her face, like she's enjoying this a lot. And so I think there are little seeds planted there. But yeah, I think when Matsumoto was drawing Queen Millennia and he decided that Yayoi, which is a Prometheum civilian identity, had actually a sister who was a redhead, or brown hair in the animated series. I think you can sort of feel that the moment when he himself figures out what is the relation between Maetel and Emeraldus, which was not necessarily there right from the beginning. But at that moment, you say, of course, they're sisters, like Yayoi and Selene in the past. And even at the end of the manga, Selene gets a scar across her face. So you really he's making pointing it out, like, see? And that's very interesting because there's this relationship and goes into much more detail about it in Maetel Legend with how they react to their mother becoming a monster, basically. And then Space Symphony Maetel, where you can see again, a lot of this sort of disagreement between the sisters on how to deal with the situation. And up to the latest manga, Galaxy Express manga, which he stopped drawing in the early 2000s, basically 2005, I think, something like that. In the novels, Ultimate Journey, and in the new manga, Another Story from Yuzuru Shimazaki, where you actually see more interactions between Maetel and Emeraldas, and they are very lovely interactions. Like the sisters are fully reconciled, and Emeraldas is super supportive of Maetel and task and her role and so on. So it's actually pretty sweet. It was very dysfunctional, but at least it reaches a point where they have a working relationship and really behave as loving sisters and not so much as frenemies anymore.
Yeah, because when you think of it, like, so Maetel is always like the compliant daughter. She's maybe it's because I think she might be the oldest of the two, and she's like pretty much like as you said, taking over the royal duty. But like Emeraldas, on the other hand, she's like the rebellious daughter who doesn't follow any rule and lives on her own.
She's a free trader.
Yes, exactly. She lives a life on her own, the way she wants to, essentially.
Yeah, her own terms.
On her own terms, thank you. And Maetel is very much like complying and saying yes and fulfilling her duty diligently.
Yeah, and she's learning how to balance the necessity to follow duty and rebel against it. I mean, that's in Yamato, right? The Yamato crew has to sort of break military rule. When do you break the line? When do you hold the line? It's always a delicate balance, but you have to continue working on that throughout life, because when you stop, you pathologize into something worse.
Well, one thing I always find amusing, and I think someone on the internet mentioned this, I don't remember on which website. You always get the image of Emeraldas is a sort of warrior sister, and Maetel is a sort of soft-spoken sister. But if you look at their respective body counts, Maetel, you get on Maetel's wrong side, she blows up your planet.
Yeah,
Emeraldas
is
a pacifist in comparison to Maetel. When you look really at what they're doing, Maetel is a scary one.
Leijiverse in Star Wars is always a bit of a chicken and the egg. Apparently, some proposal documents for Hardluck got out before the manga released, and you see some maybe things being taken or tasted or experimented with in developmental documents for Star Wars. But we definitely have like Darth Vader, his character sort of extracted of all of its qualities and assigned to all these different sort of Queen Melania. So we have the Queen Melania character, and then we have Faust in Adu, and then we have Maetel herself, and they're all kind of echoing different sentiments of who Darth Vader was collectively. He was a very complicated character, as you find out in the prequels, whether or not you like those. That's the story. So it's very interesting that, you say, well, she'll blow up your planet. Well, so will Darth Vader. He'll call that order, or maybe Darth Vader and Palpatine. I'm not a Star Wars guy, but you see those concepts spread out throughout this royal family, and when you see them at their darkest.
Well, one thing is sure is that George Lucas was a huge fan of comic books from all over the world, and in France, we have Mézières and Christin, who were the creators of Valerian and Laureline, which is sort of seminal work of sci-fi. And they also have a claim that Star Wars took their ideas from us. So I think for all the comic book artists and writers working the sort of 60s, 70s, when Star Wars came out, many of them were like, wait a second.
Yeah, Lucas was just this kid in San Francisco with apparently a lot of access. And I guess they were just getting comics mailed to their house from all over the world or something, maybe when he was a kid. I don't know. Well, I know that California would be a good point of ingress to get Japanese content. And I think I read your added point here, and that's why I was a little confused, Julien. You have another point here. Do you want to make that?
Basically, I think it's you have this very striking image in the manga and in the anime as well of Maetel being a sort of two-faced character, like one face on each side, and one is maybe Prometheum and the other Maetel, but it's maybe not that clear-cut at times. And I think it's really reminding of another mythological figure, which is Hecate. And Hecate is a three-faced goddess, so it's a maiden, the mother, and the crone. And Maetel is all three as well. She is the young love of Tetsuro. She is Tetsuro's mother in some way. And she is this immortal being, this Grim Reaper kind of. She is also fate incarnate in a way. So yeah, again, Maetel as a mythological figure is something you can really feel.
I like this a lot because Hecate was the goddess of magic and dark art, and Maetel is very often called a witch or like a sorceress. Several points in the manga.
A black magic woman, so to speak, to quote Santana there. Let's talk about the history of Maetel, how she came to be. We've touched on a lot of different things, but let's get more specific, especially up top with Maetel, the name. And it was originally mater, from what I understand, this being Latin from the word mother. And in Japanese, the L and the R are pretty much interchangeable. I hesitate to make a strong statement with a very prolific manga translator. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about L and R, Ito.
Yes, of course. Yes. So indeed, mother in Latin is mater, mater. But as you said, which is very rightly, the L and the R there's no distinction in Japanese. It's the same sound, which is like halfway. It's it's halfway between the R and the L. So when you translate, so you take this word mater. If you pronounce it in English, that would be something like mater. And if you translate that, if you transliterate that into Japanese, you get meteru. And the R becomes this, the closest sound in Japanese is ru, and then you get meteru. And I think that's the commonly accepted origin for the name of Maetel.
Yeah, it's, this is kind of a degradation of language we're seeing, right? Because we're going from Latin to Japanese to English. And through that, we go from mater to Maetel. So technically, you could say it's mistranslated, but Matsumoto kept it. Matsumoto has embraced Maetel as the English pronunciation. And my speculation is that it just sounds really French. You guys are French, so I'm asking. To me, it sounds like this is a more elegant sort of L, right? Sound to it. Do you think I'm way off base here? You guys would be the ones I have to ask. This is my speculation. So, there's a lot of French accents on my channel. I'm not going to lie here. Tell me what you think.
I think I really don't know about the French thing because I never felt like Maetel was French sounding, really. But I feel that there are a lot of the sounds I think were very appealing to Matsumoto because it sounds also a bit like metal, What
about Mabel? Isn't Mabel sort of, is that got French etymology to it? Is that not? Okay. Mabel came to mind. So I'm speaking a whole different language here. Please go on.
But yeah, the metal, the material of machine people also kind of sounds like metal, and so you have already these little hints that they're more to her than it looks, and that depending on how you look at her or depending on how you look at her name, you will get different sides of this character, and I think that for Matsumoto. Matsumoto plays a lot with a lot of his character names are really puns, so he really likes this stuff.
Oh yeah, there's like triple meaning to everything. Even Leiji could be, I guess in the katakana could be illustrative, but it also means it's got Rei, zero in it, right? It's like really deeply wound. Go ahead. Yeah,
and Maetel also, just as Julien said, it sounds like metal, but it sounds also like meta, like meta in Japanese. It's like, this, is that the English word? This matter, these things like that are in the spaceship interfaces all over the place, like, this round thing with like...
the meters?
meters. Yeah, they're like all over
Yeah.
the place. Yes, in Japanese, it's you would translate it as meta. And actually, when you say in Japanese the expression Matsumoto meta, it's exactly that. This like the thing, because it's so emblematic of this design that is given this Japanese expression Matsumoto meta, meter.
You mentioned another Belgian poet, Julien.
Yeah, one theory that's been around for a while was it could have been also a reference to Maurice Maeterlinck, who is a Belgian poet who is better known for The Bluebird. And there was an anime adaptation on which Matsumoto worked in the 80s. So
yeah, I think he did the design of the character, didn't he?
Yeah.
The original design.
I think he mentioned somewhere that he was actually a big fan of Maeterlinck. So maybe that's sort of it's less a French inspiration and more Belgian inspiration.
Right. German influence there. That does make a lot of sense. Let's talk about the inspiration that led to Maetel in popular culture. We've kind of touched on it, but more specifically, Marianne Hold, this actress in a movie that was very formative in Matsumoto's life. We've talked about it a ton. Marianne of My Youth. This is a French and West German film. It was either filmed in one, dubbed in the other. It might have been filmed in both, because I believe that was very common.
Twice. They did two versions with different actors, with only Marianne Hold as a sort of common pillar between both versions.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there were different actors, but also like this was very commonplace, right? Before the dubbing became, that technology was more available. They just shoot the whole thing twice.
So actually, I've got a question. So I watched it again this year in April, and it's such a good movie, and I really like it. I was in tears most of it. But like, is the German version? I never come across it. Has it been released on DVD, or is it available somehow?
That's a good question. I've seen screenshots of it, basically, where you see like Vincent, the main character, being played by a guy with dark hair. So it's like, whoa, who is this guy? But I haven't seen the German version. I just know it exists.
So maybe some more research to do out there, Leijiverse. Help these guys figure this out. Marianne of My Youth. We want to see the West German version.
I think in German it's Marianne, my Jugendsliebe. The title. Like Marianne, the love of my youth. Just a very quick summary of what this movie is about. It's a sort of summer camp, I guess, for boys in a castle in Bavaria, so in Germany. You don't really know where it is. It's very mystical. It's in forest. There's a lake, but the area is called Heiligenstadt, which is basically the land of heaven. And you have boys from all over the world coming to that place, and one of them is Vincent. And Vincent is a bit of I wouldn't say a troublemaker, but he has a very complicated and ambiguous relationship with his mom, for starters. And she's actually, she was a widow or a divorcee, I don't remember exactly, but she's basically getting married again, and he's not taking that very well. And basically, he plays guitar. Animals come to him. He has this sort of magnetic charisma to him. At some point, on a dare, basically, he crosses the lake to go, and on the other side, it's supposed to be a haunted house. And he goes on the other side, and when he comes back, in the middle of a storm, he claims to have seen a beautiful blonde woman in this house. It's supposed to be abandoned. Is it a dream? Is it reality? You never quite know. It's a very poetic movie. An interesting thing is that it's based on a novel by Peter de Mendelssohn, who was a German writer. I think German writer living in France, I think. And the original title is Painful Arcadia.
Yes, we dove into that in the last episode too.
Yeah.
It came up as well. So.
And so you have Marianne Hold playing this mysterious woman dressed in black a lot of the times, living in this castle. There's a portrait of her that's sort of out of time. That's something Matsumoto reused in Adieu Galaxy Express. Very sort of an homage to this.
Or at least
thing.
Rintaro did it. I don't know if that portrait appears in the other incarnations.
Yeah. But basically, you have the castle in Adieu Galaxy Express and all of that. It's really, really a strong visual connection. All this stuff on Rametal, a romantic version of Rametal, very different from how it looks in other works. Yeah, basically Matsumoto did that sort of fictional region, Matsumoto turned it into the ancestral home of the Harlock clan.
Yeah, and he'll go on to fictionalize locations and names and of real historical things. You know, this is really prevalent in his Battlefield series about World War II, where you get kind of a fantasized version of World War II. And so everything about the Earth is there in character, but it's a different character.
And I think Matsumoto saw Marianne when he was 17, I think. It was never very clear to me how exactly he saw it, because Matsumoto in interviews, it turns into a story, so you never quite know what he's talking about sometimes. There's an interview where he says he saw it in France when he was a kid, but I don't think he actually went to France when he was a teenager.
See, I just asked another Matsumoto expert. I was like, wait, did Matsumoto go to France as a kid? Because his father went to France and did work there as he was learning to be a pilot, but he might not have gone himself. So my expert said he didn't go, but yes, there's a story where he says he did go, and maybe he felt like he had been there because he'd been around French people his whole life. I mean, especially for Japan, such a what's the word I want to? I don't want to say xenophobic, but I want to say isolated island, right? Not a lot of other cultures coming in there. He was probably of the top 1% in Japan at that time to have experienced another culture.
Now that I have some experience, let's say, with Matsumoto and how he goes on tangents when he talks, is that probably what happened. He was talking about seeing Marianne in his youth and then jumping in the sort of same sentence to another thing about visiting France when he was an adult, like in the 80s, because we know he went in the 80s. He was even like drawing the journey for a newspaper and so on. So I think he really sort of made a tangent, but because it's Matsumoto, it's in this sort of rambling kind of way. The journalist who translated the interview sort of didn't realize that he was talking about a completely different time period, and that's how we get this confusion. That's what I believe now.
He had a little bit of he was overexcited in his storytelling, and people got confused. Yeah, that's never happened to me.
But in any case, he saw the movie. He was 17, and basically, Marianne, that she became this sort of ideal, otherworldly woman for him, and it really it burned his brain with this image.
Yeah, she represents, the ideal woman in a lot of ways for Matsumoto, and this kind of ideal woman archetype. And is the ideal woman even real? That's probably right. They're not there in real life. They're there in your head. Even if you meet a woman you believe is your ideal woman, your ideal of that person is not who that person is, and it never will be. And there's going to be that disconnect. So managing the disconnect while not totally losing the magic is very difficult in relationships. So also Takako Kusamoto, she modeled for Starsha or Stacia. I remember now.
This black and white photo. It's actually Kusamoto Takako.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
So she lived in the early 20th century, so she didn't directly model for Starsha, but basically he found a picture of her and he really loved her traits. And I don't know if he found it after designing Starsha. I think in some interview he says he came across a photo afterwards and realized that unconsciously he may have drawn her because actually he realized his great-grandfather or something actually knew the family. So he has this story where it's like, my great-grandfather must have been in love with her, and somehow it stayed in my genes. And so when I drew Starsha, I was actually remembering this woman from the past.
Takiko Kato, also a good friend of Matsumoto's for decades, and actually sang on the Captain Harlock CGI movie in French. So there was another inspiration, he says, or lineage of inspiration for Maetel.
She's probably, Tokiko Kato is probably better known as singing on the Porco Rosso soundtrack, the Le Temps des Cerises, also in French. So yeah, she loves France, and on the Captain Harlock soundtrack, she makes her best Edith Piaf kind of voice. She wrote some preface or afterwards in some of Matsumoto's manga, and she's known him and I presume his wife for a long time as well. So she's really like a friend of the family.
But I did want to move right on to the prototypical incarnation that I found through your website, Julien. Maybe you could tell us a bit about Natasha and Koshka.
Yeah, so Natasha and Koshka are early shoujo manga by Matsumoto, when he still doesn't quite have the style we know and love, but it's not quite Tezuka style anymore. It's sort of in between.
Miyako Maki influence probably at that time.
Definitely a lot of that. And there are characters basically wearing, they're young blonde women, younger than Maetel, but wearing the sort of Russian fur dress and kubanka. So you could see them as sort of prototypes of Maetel, or at least a sort of early sign that Matsumoto really liked that aesthetic, this sort of style, Russian inspiration for female characters. It's very shoujo. I mean, it's like it's a war in 1917 or something, and Natasha has lost her lover in the war, and but she managed to find him, so it's a love story. Matsumoto, as we know, is a huge movie fan. He watches a lot of stuff. He watched a lot of Western movies, not just with cowboy, but movies from the West, basically. I think it's pretty sure that he saw Dr. Zhivago, which was such a huge hit when it came out. In this movie, there's Julie Christie playing Lara Antipova, who wears this kind of clothes. She's a beautiful blonde woman with a fur coat and kubanka, and I'm pretty sure that's what Matsumoto had in mind when he was drawing Natasha and Koshka. It's roughly in the same, I think, a couple of years after Dr. Zhivago.
We kind of glossed over this too. We'll get to it when we talk about the appearances, but Maetel or Natasha in that shoujo you mentioned wearing a red fur trim coat, but the red fur coat being referenced in a Space Symphony Maetel, and that Natasha character design echoed very strongly in specifically Space Symphony Maetel. Any other thoughts on prototypical incarnations? I did mention Sexoroid a bit, and that being more of an influence from Barbarella. So you could definitely see a bit of Barbarella coming through to Maetel there, but I'm not knowledgeable enough about Sexoroid specifically. I guess I could ask either of you if Sexoroid's influence translates well to Maetel in any way.
The main character of Sexoroid, so she's Yuki number 7, I think that's her name. Basically, what the story is on Sexoroid, very quickly, it's a sort of spy story with some villains hatching some nefarious plans involving futuristic Japan. You have this sort of spy main character who is sort of blasé about it and would rather not go to work. He's forced to team up with this beautiful, gorgeous woman who is actually a robot meant to infiltrate and seduce the enemy and so on. And they start having a sort of on-off relationship as they thwart some nefarious plans. One of them, which is referenced in a lot of Matsumoto's work, is a cameo plan, where basically a faction in Japan wants to go and colonize another planet and basically recreate a sort of imperial Japan on another planet and then destroy Earth. I think the main character is Shima, and Shima and Yuki, they learn about these plans, and despite themselves being Japanese, they say, "Oh, that's wrong," and they try to prevent these shady people from
sabotaging the master plan of a larger corrupt government. So I could see a correlation there between Sexoroid and Maetel. But let's talk about the proper appearances. Let's try not to get too bogged down in the stories of each of these, because I think we've touched on a lot of them. But we'll try to mark some notable moments of Maetel in each of these. And first, most prominently, the Galaxy Express 39 series. We're talking about manga. We're talking about the anime series, and then we're talking about the anime movies. Most notable about the movies, at least, to get it out of the way, directed by Rintaro. It has a sequel called Adieu Galaxy Express. And what you might notice in these, and I think a good point to talk about with these, is the difference between Maetel in each of these incarnations. And it's something Julien brought up top, which is how this character is represented differently in all of them. In the manga, in the series, you see her with a lot more autonomy, but in the movie, you see her as being a bit more helpless. And I think that's most notable at the end of the GE999 movie. Tetsuro has to take the pendant, which is her father, and throw it into this abyss to destroy La Maetel, and she won't do it. She won't take the autonomy upon herself. And so, like I was saying with the Tetsuro and Maetel representing an anima and animus, Tetsuro makes the more aggressive move there and has to just throw the thing in, finish the deal. But I believe she's a lot more autonomous in the other representations, which I'm less familiar with. So maybe either of you could kind of enlighten me a bit more on that Maetel. I guess at the end of the day, in the movie, you'll never see her pick up her whip and smack somebody or fire a shot, but you see her do all those things in the series and the manga, from what I understand. So go ahead.
But you're right. I just checked basically this final chapter of the manga, and as we see here, it's actually in the manga. It's actually Maetel which throws a pendant, and she's being quite let's say a bit flippant about it. Like her mother is like, "Oh, my daughter, you will rule by my side," and Maetel is like, "Oh, actually, ciao, bye."
She's not as autonomous in the movie as she is, and then maybe there's more of an impetus to make her the damsel in distress, since it's a shorter format and it needs to fit something more archetypal. And he really wants to lean into the romance of it. Rintaro does, which I don't think Leiji Matsumoto objected to. And then we move on to, like we pointed out, the manga continuation. Brief thoughts on how Maetel develops past the original ending point of the initial 999 series.
I think this continuation, there's nothing much standing out for me, but it seems like Matsumoto, well, the sense I had when I was translating it is like, since Matsumoto was adding mysteries upon mysteries and questions upon questions and not really delivering any answer, and it was always like Maetel like saying, "Oh, for example, hey Tetsuro, this is your new path. You don't know what is final destination because it might change, and we never know. It depends on what's going to happen." And
are we going off the rails, so to speak, in terms of like proper, well-paced shonen storytelling? We've kind of lost the plot at this point, maybe.
I think so. I mean, I love this part for sure, but I think there are some weaknesses for sure.
And you get the sense that, as we were talking about earlier, that Matsumoto is not such great at plotting a story. But with Galaxy Express, he actually had I think he had a clear idea where he was going, because if you look at the sort of timeline, the movie came out very early on, 79, and the manga was far from done at this stage. And manga continued, I think, until 82, 83, something like that. And the ending is pretty much there already. You can feel that Matsumoto actually, this time, he knew where he was going with this journey. Or he basically had to figure it out for the movie, and then he just stuck to it for the manga. Maybe that's what happened. But at least he knew there was a sort of clear journey, because he loved these characters, Maetel and Tetsuro. I think they're really his favorite characters, and he just wanted to get back to them and continue their adventures, but he didn't really know why. So again, he was sort of making it up as he went. And you can feel that there's no clear plot driving this new journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as a storyteller, Matsumoto's strength is short stories. I mean, I know like long stories For example, like Queen Millennia, the manga, I found it a bit boring, I have to say. But also, it's
Julien,
because
Julie, I love this. Julien, you've brought up Queen Millennia as a masterwork of Matsumoto's before.
Yeah.
How do you disagree?
For me, Queen Millennia is one of these rare examples where Matsumoto manages to tell us a very epic and wonderful story from beginning to end, and it just works, and he stops when he needs to. But I think, for instance, the animated series of Queen Millennia, not the manga, as they had only this sort of first third of the story and they did like 40 episodes of it. So it drags on and on and on, and it never seems to go anywhere.
Okay.
I didn't feel that with the manga, but again, it's
is that the difference?
Different reactions.
Is that the difference, Ido, do you think?
Yeah, so I think the reason why I didn't really like the manga, I think it comes from the way it was published, because it was published in a newspaper with like probably one page at a time every day. So it has to make sure that each page had a lot of content. So it's like actually the Queen Millennia manga is actually very heavy in text compared to Galaxy Express 39. And it's also like each page always, very often ends up in a cliffhanger that you don't want to miss the next installment of this story. So for me, like I found it breaks the pace. But I think when Matsumoto is very good at is short stories, like, one of my absolute favorite manga of Matsumoto is the Kaeradzaru Toki no Monogatari, which translates as Tales of Time Gone By. I think it's been translated in French. I didn't translate it, but it's such a good one, and it's a collection of short stories. And for me, that's when his style and his storytelling really shines. And I think Galaxy Express works really well because each story stops in each planet. It can be seen as this
Planet of the Week is the way I always say it.
Yeah,
not Monster of the Week. It's Planet of the Week.
That's the one Julien is showing it. It's such a good one. It's very much my favorite.
Yeah, so the kind of endless continuation doesn't trigger your endorphins as much as the shorter ones do. I will say I think the later Leijiverse works are much more focused towards the legacy fans, and what do the legacy fans want? They want expanded universe, they want more cohesion, they want little points, little neurons connected. But what initially gets you in is that shorter story. And I think that's why I recommend to everybody to watch the GE9 Galaxy Express 39 movie first. If you want to get into Matsumoto, that's my suggestion. And I know Julien suggests the Queen Emeraldus OVA, which honestly isn't too much longer. So yeah, definitely short stories work well. Then in the middle of this restarted Galaxy Express manga, we have Eternal Fantasy, which to me doesn't really expand on Maetel too much. It's like meeting her again, and maybe that's why she's more of a stabilized character, more familiar in that representation.
But there's also this character. So this movie introduces a new character called Hel Mazaria, which is also could be seen as a mother figure because her name is literally Hel Mother.
Right. Well, yeah, she's just Hel Mater in Cosmo Warrior Zero, from what I understand. So,
yes, she's a sister, like that. Yeah.
Okay.
The two characters are basically the mirror versions of Maetel and Emeraldus in a way. So
Maetel has a metanoid sister because is Hel Mater not a metanoid, but she works with the metanoids?
Basically, El Mazaria and El Matia, how exactly her name is spelled is a bit confusing. Yeah. But these two characters, so the warrior woman from Eternal Fantasy and the spy, agent provocateur kind of character from Cosmo Warrior Zero.
Okay, yeah. So she gets a bizarro version of herself, not the complimentary Emeraldus. We get the corrupted or dark side version, Hel Mother. Quickly, I want to talk about 3 movies at once. I want to talk about Maetel Legend, how that leads into Cosmo Warrior Zero, and how that leads into Space Symphony Maetel, because this is the origin story of Maetel. And I think if we're going to deep dive in anything, we should look at these. And quickly, we see in each of them respectively, Maetel Legend, she wears a white dress, Cosmo Warrior Zero, she wears a blue dress. Space Symphony Maetel, she wears that red dress, echoing back to Natasha, like we mentioned earlier. And what we're seeing here is in Legend, she's dealing with the end of Queen Millennia, what happens to her people. In Cosmo Warrior Zero, we see a war against humanity levied by her people, and I guess this renewed attempt to take over the Earth through the Machine Man angle. And then in Space Symphony Maetel, we see the aftermath of that, and also sort of a rebirth of Tetsuro in a way. Julien, please help us connect the dots here.
It's you can maybe I'm off base here, but I
could
always
be too.
get this feeling that in the 90s, Matsumoto he went through this sort of rebirth of getting anime done again and so on, and in a lot of this, I think, started with the video games. And this guy, we talked about it when we talked about Cosmo Warrior Zero, but this guy called Dr. Serial Nishioka, who I actually don't have much info about him, except that at this time, he was really sort of pushing this Matsumoto revival.
Likely a pseudonym, right? I mean...
Yeah. Maybe Nishioka is his actual name, but Dr. Serial for sure is not his name.
Yeah.
And he appears as a character in the Galaxy Express manga continuation. He's on a planet Technologia, and he's a sort of godfather of machines and humans living together in harmony. And I think he was really pushing for more Matsumoto on screen and trying, because I believe, being someone who came from the video game industry, where he was much younger than Matsumoto, probably coming from a bit of a different angle. And I think a lot of this push to have a more unified storyline, let's say, came really from Nishioka. And yeah, in Maetel Legend, we see Maetel in white being this sort of innocent girl. Chronologically, then you would have Space Symphony Maetel, where she's in red. She's more of a teenager. She's more... That's the most action version of Maetel we saw. Basically, she's fighting with a sword and going into all kinds of mischief.
So did I mess up the order? It's Space Symphony, then Cosmo Warrior Zero, isn't it?
Basically, you have the order of production, right? But if you try to sort of make sense of the story, Space Symphony would actually be somewhere between Maetel Legend and Cosmo Warrior. And so she's a passionate Maetel. She's in red, she's young, she's hot-blooded Maetel, basically. So it works very well visually. I would say that in Cosmo Warrior, Maetel is in blue. She's kind of reached the other side of that, and now she's sad and sort of resigned, Maetel.
Is she sort of like sorry for what she's done through her passion? Like, did her passion lead to the war that sets us up for the plot of Cosmo Warrior Zero?
You kind of get that she's at a point in her life when she lost hope a little, and she lost her place. She doesn't know where to go, what to do, so she's in this sort of sad moment.
Right. Well, after you have mania, you have depression, right? They are intrinsically
and that leads us to grief Maetel, and that's Maetel in black, which we know from the rest of her journey, basically.
Video games, like we mentioned, Cosmo Warrior Zero originally starting as a video game and becoming an anime, and then we get another video game, Matsumoto Leiji 999, a PlayStation game in 2001, I guess the same year, which is interesting. He's replaced Galaxy Express with his own name there, or somebody has. So I think they want to tell a more arcing story about his work. Maybe the term Leijiverse didn't come to their mind. Leijiverse 3.9 might have been a better way to put it there. Any thoughts on that game? Ito, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a very big, very long game, but I love it a lot because it includes a lot of different franchise. I mean, it's not just about Galaxy Express 3.9, although it's centered on Tetsuro and Maetel, but it also includes a lot of franchise with like Hardluck, Emerald Dash. There's also minor ones. There's a small chapter around Yamato, Queen Millennia, Mahoroba also. And there's a lot of, it's just a massive game, and there's a lot of content. It's absolutely fabulous. I really wish that they would be like a remake.
I think we need a fan translation at some point. Wink, wink.
Yeah, a great starting point for us plebs.
Yeah, so this actually, I don't know how many, just for the voice, it's actually mostly, it's not fully voiced, but a lot of recordings, and there's probably an hour and a half of just recorded voices. And so I don't even want to imagine how much text there is actually to translate. But if I want to put out this call, if anybody is motivated for doing fan translation, probably won't be committing to the whole thing, but I would be very happy to help if anybody with the relevant technical knowledge would like to help.
You heard it here, Leijiverse. That's the call's been put out, and I would be happy to help facilitate that.
It felt gameplay-wise, it was an adventure game. It's like not lot of combat or stuff like that. It could have been a sort of point-and-click adventure in a way. You go around, talk to people, you pick up, this bottle, what can I do with it? There was a Galaxy Express game on the DS as well, which is a sort of Japanese RPG, I think.
Yes, very boring.
Speaking of maybe lackluster, the Galaxy Express 3.9 Flash remake comes out in 2002, which is very, very much of its time, the early 2000s Flash animation, web animation, Newgrounds. I mean, this new technology that they saw where they had the ability to make this infinitely scalable, even though we probably only have access to it in like 480p now, rendition of, but I believe it's more faithful to the manga, which is something notable about it. It sort of got that moving panel vibe to it that's very, very commonplace now. You see it like in Hearthstone a lot, where the animated flat images.
Absolutely. And one thing that, I have to rant a little bit here. As you said, Flash anime is vector-based, so you can absolutely stretch it to infinity and have absolutely pristine image. But they didn't use any of that when they remastered it for the DVD. Is it on the Blu-ray edition? I don't think so, but like it's very block. I mean, they could have reused the Flash original sources and remaster it render it at the definition of a Blu-ray or DVD, and you would have something absolutely beautiful. And instead of that, you get something that's really pixely and not nice. And I'm so angry at that.
One thing to say, I don't know if this came from Toei or from Matsumoto himself, but you see that in the 90s and pretty much always, Matsumoto was always, if a new technology comes out, he wants to play with it. Like it can be CGI or 3D or planetarium stuff. I don't know if it comes from him directly, but if someone comes and say, do you want to do Galaxy Express as a Flash animation? He would say, for sure, let's do that. And you see this with Ring of the Nibelung, where at some point these publishers say, hey, do you want it to publish on the web? And I guess Matsumoto has two questions. What is the web, and when do we start?
Yeah, he's like that with a ton of his properties. I mean, Submarine Super 99 has some of the first surround sound in an anime. What else do we have? We have
Arei no Kagami 1982 was one of the first CGI in an anime. It's a short OVA from 82 was around.
Oh, that was shown at a World's Fair, wasn't it?
That's it, exactly.
Yes. Okay, so we have that, and then we have Hardluck 3D, which is also like a revolutionary 3D anime. It's if you want to get Matsumoto on board with a project, and you have something that maybe you don't want to commit too hard to for these like Toei, like they don't want to. Let's take Hardluck. Hardluck is kind of older. We have more freedom. We're not going to alienate anybody we really care about in the market right now. Like the old fans always kind of have to deal with this, but it's a way to bring him in.
It's like taking less of a risk. You still want to be successful and have people to see what it is you're making with this new technology.
Mm-hmm. And something you see also with video games is that the Japanese are, I think, much better than we in the West when it comes to keeping on their mind their old IPs and showing that they care about them. And I think that was also a way for Toei to say, yes, we are moving to CGI now. It's a sort of big leap. But look, we're doing it with one of our classic anime IPs. So, we're not like throwing the past out of the window. We are sort of reinventing it
And they might actually get some people in the seats that way too, instead of asking people to to have faith in brand new characters, which also is a very expensive process in and of itself. But getting back to Maetel, she appears in Captain Harlock Dimensional Voyage, which again, we're talking about Leijiverse holistic properties. This series is full of basically every Leijiverse character you can think of, to Diver Zero, to Queen Emeraldus, to Maetel, to the Maharoba, as you'd mentioned before. Okay, that's what it looks like in Japan, and a beautiful representation of the. I don't know if SF Comics has always had that border around it, or if this is a special thing.
That actually is a Mandarake, which is a nerdy store chain in Japan.
Yeah, I get a bunch of images.
They did these special covers, sort of retro Harlock covers for Dimension Voyage, and it's actually the French edition, but the Japanese jacket fits perfectly. So I made a mix.
Yeah, I got mine at Mandarake as well. I didn't know it was made by Mandarake, but like when I saw them, I thought like, yes, I had to get it, even though I've got a regular normal edition of this manga.
I think
hook, line, and sinker.
The boss, the CEO, or whatever they call them in Japan, of Mandarake, is actually a huge fan of Matsumoto, and actually they did some reprints of Natasha and some of these very old manga, and it was really the Mandarake guy as a sort of fan of manga history. He wanted to have them back on the market and do collector editions.
I'd seen all these sort of revival products, these sort of like limited edition products on Mandarake, but I didn't realize they were actually Mandarake products, because they're a distributor, right? And they work with a lot of like retro things. So it's cool they make new things. I wasn't so aware of that. And so there's a ton of Leijiverse in here. If you like manga and you want to know all about the Leijiverse, this is a fantastic way to start Dimensional Voyage.
And it came at a moment where Leiji and his team, let's say, were trying to do this movie called Cosmo Dreadnought Maoroba, which was sort of reinvention of the Maoroba, this big epic movie. Sadly, it didn't happen in the end. But they wanted to sort of have this, again, all these stories, all these characters coming together in a sort of shared universe. And so you have Ultimate Spider-Man, you have the Ultimate Journey Leijiverse in a way.
Multiverse,
And because there was a novels which gave a conclusion to the Galaxy Express, the second manga, basically, the Eternal Fantasy kind arc. And the Maoroba movie, which was supposed to be done, and Dimension Voyage is also in that sort of same continuity with characters. You have a little tease of the Maoroba in Dimension Voyage at some point on a page.
Let's focus on Maetel for a second. Any thoughts on Maetel's appearance in this? Do we feel it's very archetypal again, or was there anything that we learned about Maetel in Dimensional Voyage? Because I only have 2 issues at this point.
I think she doesn't make a lot of appearance there, right? I mean, Tetsuro makes a couple of appearances. The story. I
skipped over like Hardluck Saga too, and probably because like her appearance isn't very notable, even though she shows up and tells a young boy not to do something, and then he does it anyways. So that's pretty much Maetel in a nutshell for the most part. I mean, does that sound?
And young men are dumb.
Again. Yeah, exactly. That's where we're at.
They should listen to women. That's the key takeaway.
But not too much. See, that's the other point of it too. Don't let a woman lead you astray either, or read between the lines, right? So it's the balance. It's not one or the other.
But basically the novels led to, going back to Maetel, to the Ginga Tetsudo 39 Ultimate Journey, Another Story, which is the longest title ever. And it sort of fits into this Leiji multiverse, let's say. But it's, as it says in the title, it's another story. It's not exactly the same story as in the novels. It starts the same way and then goes into this big crossover with the Ring of the Nibelungen and so on. So
Harlock Saga.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier Captain Harlock Dimensional Voyage being like a crossover of the Leijiverse, but this manga, Galaxy Express 39 Ultimate Journey, is like a massive crossover. There is like appearance from Stazinger,
Dangard.
uh,
I think
Dangard.
Dangard's in it.
Is
Oh,
that-
no. Sorry. Not. I'm still thinking about Dimensional
No, it could be
Voyage.
actually. It could. Oh yeah, no. You're absolutely right because the bad guy,
Okay.
the villain from Dangard,
Captain Dan? Well, he's not a villain, though. He's
the
like...
bad guy, the
Doppler.
Doppler. Yes. It
Oh,
makes an appearance in that manga.
And he's in Submarine Super 99 as well, that kind of character archetype that we don't see in much of the Leijiverse, the bald.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yes.
And that's and there's even a moment where I love this stuff. You have Emeraldas and Queen Rafflesia from Captain Harlock sharing a drink in a saloon, like having a girls' night out, and you have Doppler coming and crashing the party, and so like
yeah.
Raising a stink.
As a fan of the Leijiverse, I love this series, but like I don't know how. I'm not sure if you're not a fan how you would react to that, because there's a very intense in terms of the number of characters and yeah. Anyway, for me it's a great manga. I hope it's going to be translated.
I
maybe
mean,
you will translate it.
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot on your plate, Ito. So start if you want to help translate. Hit up Ito. I don't even know how to get a hold of you, Ito. I barely know how to get a hold of you. So maybe get in the comments section once I post this video and start. You've got the other Leijiverse. Isn't that your channel? The other YouTube channel called Leijiverse? Because it is. Yeah. Yes. I don't know. We'll talk about the merger later. And then we have the last one that I noted was Jerome Alquier's version of Maetel. She also makes another brief appearance. Memoirs de la Arcadia, Memories of the Arcadia, released 2019, but finally released in America by Ablaze Publishing. If you followed Leijiverse on Facebook, facebook.com/Leijiverse, we actually throughout the entire year got to post behind the scenes artwork for all the covers that all the special covers that was made. It was awesome. But not to get too deep in the weeds in that, what do we think about Maetel in that appearance? I don't even know if she's in the first one. Thoughts on Maetel in this incarnation?
I think Maetel appears at the beginning of the second volume from the French edition, so I don't exactly know the US version it works.
I think it's the same, yeah.
And she has actually a very cute appearance because she saves Dr. Leiji's life. You have Leiji Matsumoto as a character who sort of, no spoiler, but she gets into a bit of a predicament in the first volume. And in the second volume, you have basically Maetel coming and saving his life. So that was pretty cute. But it's very a cameo. I mean, she's there for 2-3 pages and then she's off to her own adventures.
I believe in our interview with Jerome Alquier, yes, he described that very specifically, and he proposed the idea of how Maetel would be brought in, and I think Matsumoto was on board because he was being rescued by his own character there, the motherly savior, I guess, in that instance. So,
like just now, reflecting on all this appearance of Maetel, it feels like as time progresses, and as even though we got lots of questions, we still got a few answers. And so, for example, now we know how Galaxy Express finishes. It wasn't the case at the late 70s. So, like, I wonder how her role has changed, because it seems like she's become maybe less mysterious than she used to be at the beginning. Because the more obviously she appears, the more background we know about her, and the more context we've got about what happened to her. So, I got the feeling that maybe, she's become a bit less mysterious as she was at the beginning.
She's definitely a bit more of a conventional heroine now in the latest stories. Just the fact that she has a Cosmo Dragoon now sort of put her really like, okay, so she's on the sort of same level as Harlock and company. I wouldn't say it takes away from the character, but it's definitely not exactly the same as she was at the beginning. So there's clearly been an evolution there, and she's less of this mysterious guide into a bit of a more of an protagonist role. So there you see a bit of a difference.
And that's an interesting thing to bring up with all the Leijiverse characters, is that a lot of them don't function as well as the central focal point of the story. A lot of them, and maybe don't is a rough word, but I think better would be a way to describe it. They work better as these sort of orbiting figures around the boy or girl true protagonists, the Tetsuro, the Daiba, etc., Hajime. And they work as these, like you said, the mythical characters. We have Hardluck as the mythical eternal hero, and Maetel as the eternal mother, and, Totoro is like this endless spirit of man. They all represent their own thing, but the stories rarely work best, at least in my opinion, as them as the focal point, but rather, when you have a good story about the story of Homer or the Iliad, I think I'm correct here, is that you're seeing this human character deal with all these magnificent forces, ally and enemy. And what you're interested in is putting yourself in that situation and experiencing those people. And maybe through Galaxy Express, we've seen that mystery be kind of whipped to whipping a dead horse, so to speak. And I also think you get it with Hardluck too. There's been maybe a little bit too much focus on Hardluck as a main character and not enough about the eternal spirit of these characters. We've got some other references throughout not just Matsumoto's work, but throughout the rest of popular culture. So we've talked about what inspires Maetel. Let's talk about what Maetel inspires. And we have Drifting Express 3.0, which is a bit different. Ito, would you want to give us kind of an overview of that?
I can't really remember this manga. I can't really remember if I own it or not. But so there is a character called Shizuko Hirata, and I know her because she's in, I think she's in this manga, but she's also in the PlayStation game Matsumoto Leiji 39. And she's very much like this sort of like flippant, unsexy metal that spends time drinking and getting drunk and spending time on a bench in a park, and that's very funny because in the game, let me remember, I think you need some information from her, but she won't give it to you unless like you have to find sake to give her so that she can get drunk, and then eventually you need to find a way to get the information from her. But it's very funny because she's sort of like always being drunk, and she looks exactly like Maetel, and she found rather a robe and hat, so she wears it, but like she looks like Maetel, but like she's obviously not her, and she's got a different feeling.
There's a great gag in the manga where there are a few moments in Galaxy Express when Maetel opens her robes, and so we don't know what's in there, but people like their eyes burn or something. And here you have
Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, you have Shizuko opening her robes, and it's just beer all the way, cans of beers, and that's the secret. Basically.
That would be in her Ark of the Covenant, right? And then we go back to this Holy Grail sort of. I guess that's interesting to bring it back to the Holy Grail argument. What is underneath Maetel's dress? It's the Holy Grail. And that's what all men want. Not all men, obviously, but you get what I'm saying. The quest for sexual conquest, it's hard to put it any other way.
Yeah, but look at it at your own risk.
Exactly, yes.
It's
gaze carefully, yes.
Hey, be careful what you wish for, you could say.
And sometimes there's an alcoholic under it. Yes, and she does disrobe this one time. I believe, isn't she in 000 a school teacher then? And at least that's the panels that I've seen. She's in front of a class of students, and the most legendary panel that I've seen from this is that she just kind of like trench coat flashes of full, like a bunch of school students. I'll bring that up on screen if you guys aren't familiar with it. But if Maetel's pathology is kissing Tetsuro, well, this one's gone a bit off the rails even further. It's weird. It's wonky old manga stuff that's uncomfortable.
Drifting Express is actually a very good manga in the sense that it starts as a parody, really, of Galaxy Express and making fun of these tropes of these characters, and then it goes on a journey of its own, and it's still funny, but it gets into a sort of philosophical journey of its own as well, and it reaches a very moving ending. Actually, yeah, it's pretty short. I think it's 2 volumes or 3 maybe, depending on the edition.
I think there's 3, but okay.
It's actually nice success for Matsumoto to be able to sort of riff on his own manga and still deliver something pretty good out of it.
Yeah, he's always got a strong sense of humor, and Otoko Oiden being a slice of life funny story, you can see he's got a lot of strength in being able to make fun of anything, especially himself. Otoko Oiden being the butt of many of the jokes. I'm sorry, that's not the character's name, but the main character representing Matsumoto. And Tetsuro has that too.
That's the name of the...
Nobata. Yeah, okay. We also see Blue Diamond in the show Steven Universe. Steven Universe riffing on a lot of sci-fantasy ideas, especially in anime.
I think for sure there's a lot of winks and nods to Matsumoto in Steven Universe at some point. There's a character getting basically Harlock's cloak and mentioning he stole it from some guy. Clearly, Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe, I think he's a big fan of Galaxy Express and Captain Harlock.
Okay, so in Excel Saga, I think then Excel, I guess, is the character there, held in South American detention camp along with other prisoners in an Iron Mask and this Iron Mask character is revealed to be Maetel. So I'm going to look more into that and hopefully post some good supplementary stuff. But something I did watch recently was the 5-star stories. And this is a really interesting one. This is a really grandiose sci-fantasy echoing a long lineage of sci-fantasy. I mean, if you watch this movie and you listen to the soundtrack as the opening soundtrack hit me almost as hard as the opening theatrical music to Galaxy Express 39, the movie. Love this story, and we're seeing these female robotic characters that end up being sort of a manifestation of something a bit uglier. So we have sort of a growing concern with android women, and the character designs in 5-star stories by Nobuteru Yuki, and he was also the designer for the Star Blazers Space Battleship Yamato reboots, 2199, 2205.
Was he not also the character design for Captain Harlock's Endless Odyssey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then he also, I think, did Galaxy Express 39 character designs for a pachinko game.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's absolutely correct, yes.
He's a huge fan as well of Matsumoto.
He's a student.
So something we could mention with a reference is also basically Gainax anime. Hideaki Anno, creator of course, Evangelion and so on, a huge fan of Matsumoto, many references to it. A lot of the themes we talked about for Galaxy Express, like growing up, stop being in love with a clone of your mom, stuff like that. If you could say, are we talking about Galaxy Express or Evangelion? You could ask the question. And actually, there's a nice little joke. It's in Furikuri. I don't know if you saw that one. It's a crazy anime,
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And you have this character, I forgot her name. Basically, the woman with a Vespa, which is sort of the troublemaker in the story. And at some point, the young hero asks this older, mysterious woman who she truly is, and she basically gives him the answer. I'm the memory of your youth in your art of a young man, and he looks at he looks at her for a moment, and he says, "Is that from an anime?" and the moment is very funny if you know Galaxy Express. Haruko. Yeah, that's her.
But yeah, 5-star stories. Also, though, I want to emphasize that if you're a Matsumoto fan, if you can forgive about 5 or 10 minutes of the movie where there should be action that's kind of foiled, I think it's an excellent spirit of the Leijiverse sort of thing, with a little bit more of a grounded sort of Renaissance castle-y feeling. But the female character designs in there, you see the hands that are about as long as the forearm and the feet that are about as long as the bottom half of your legs. Beautiful, beautiful, mysterious women. They skip at like 1,000 miles an hour. It's a great story.
Yeah. Are you referring to the anime adaptation of the 90s? I think there's been a remake recently.
Oh, 5-star stories?
Because I remember there's been many covers for New Type magazine with robots from 5-star stories. So I just assumed that there was a remake, but I can't really remember. But I fell asleep when I tried to watch it. But probably
I did too the first time. Yeah, I did too the first time, but I gave it a second. I was tired. I definitely needed 5-10 more minutes of action. The King character specifically, I think it's underplayed in the anime, and I think it's because they really want to focus on all these non-traditionally masculine or non-masculine characters. So I guess in the manga, I think they go a lot more into the King character.
Yeah,
but
so it was not for you. It was not the 5-star stories. It was the 40 Wings stories.
It was a bit of a 4-star too. It was just almost a 5-star. But
I love the Queen Millennia movie, and some people find it super boring. But personally, I love it. So
it's a wonderful movie.
I had my own hot takes on the Queen Millennia movie. I don't know if you saw that podcast episode. My hot takes stand, but maybe I'll do the anime series someday or the manga, and we'll get deeper on Queen Millennia. Obviously,
I think. Sorry to interrupt you. The TV series is about to get released in Germany on Blu-ray, possibly at least DVD. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah, a lot of people questioning, why did we get Submarine Super 99 and not Queen Millennia on DVD, Discotheque? What's up with that? But I think maybe they were treading the waters here for us English speakers, at least. So, listen up, Discotheque. We want that Queen Millennia anime series for sure. And the movie. But I want to give you both an opportunity to kind of speak your piece on Maetel. Final words. Ito, as our new guest, love for you to start us off.
I think what I would love to maybe we could have touched on is the different designers of Maetel, because she looks very different if she's drawn by Kazuo Komatsubara or by Keisuke Matsunaga. And that's something also very interesting because it gives her a different dimension. But I think she's probably. I was very excited to be invited to speak on this podcast because I think she's probably the richest character as far as I'm concerned. She's the richest character of all the Leijiverse, and I'm not surprised that we spend maybe 2 hours.
Getting on 3 hours again.
Yeah, just talking about her. I mean, there's so much to unpack and to discuss. So she's definitely one of the reasons why I really like Leijiverse, like Tetsuro. I think I may have fallen in love with Maetel when I discovered Galaxy Express 39. Definitely a character that's very close to my heart.
Speaking of art, I think if I'm not mistaken, you made a long time ago the very first website on Galaxy Express, which was Shonen no Kokoro, one of the very first French websites about the Leijiverse as well.
Oh.
So
yeah, I put it online on May the 1st, 1999.
Wow.
23 over 23 years ago now. It's shonen-kokoro.fr. So the design is very outdated, but I want to leave it like this and not touch it and not make any change.
A monument.
Real HTML.
Yeah.
Real thing.
Web 1.0, yeah.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you so much as you are excited to come on. I'm excited to have you, and I hope that we're going to have you again in the near future. Julien, before we give our plugs here, keep cool over there. Give us your final thoughts on Maetel. Summarize what we've learned today and fill in the blanks.
There's a reason why Maetel is one of Matsumoto's most loved characters. She has this sort of simple but beautiful design with a black dress, a kubanka, the long. It's just so iconic, you can recognize Maetel anywhere. She has a mystery. She has a symbolic, mythical aura around her. She's part of such a great story as well, so that helps, of course. And and I think it's pretty clear that she may be Matsumoto's favorite character. I mean, that's one he always wants to return to and draw her in some new context. I mean, at some point, he and one of his assistants did a historical manga about one of the province or a city in Japan. I forgot the name. Two characters traveling in time back to this era of Japan, and for the time travel, they dress as Maetel and Tetsuro. It's not Maetel and Tetsuro, but you can feel that Matsumoto wanted to draw Maetel and Tetsuro anyway. Yeah. I think it's a character that's basically the incarnation of the Leijiverse in a way. She is an eternal traveler. She's the Leijiverse.
Maetel does such a good job of filling in a blank, I think, in the, what do we call it? What are the Greek gods? The pantheon of the Leijiverse. She is perhaps the pinnacle point of the pantheon of the Leijiverse. She represents everything that surrounds the Leijiverse. Everything can come back to Maetel in some way, shape, or form, no matter what story you're talking about. That kind of thread that weaves between all is something to hold on to in a sci-fantasy story that's constantly, like we've said, tending to go off the rails a bit. And if you want to hold on to something, if you need a central focal point in the Leijiverse, Maetel's going to do a great job of that for you. And she's going to fill you with every emotion possible. You are going to love Maetel. You are going to hate Maetel. You're going to feel a little indifferent sometimes. You're going to question her. You're going to agree with her. I think more so than any other character. I've never had a situation where I hated Totoro. Every scene Totoro's in, I love him. And that's a bit one note. I don't think you could carry everything on the Leijiverse on something like that. Thank you, Leiji Matsumoto, for creating this beautiful, lovable, hateable character that we can all relate to the human experience very directly through. I want to thank you both again. Ito, again, as our new guest, is there anything you'd like to plug or share with our audience? Anything they should check out from you?
Yeah, so if you've got time and the VR headset, head to edo999.itchy.io. That's edo999.etch.io. So you'll find my the VR experience, which allows you to travel, to get on board the Galaxy Express 39. And if you got feedback, please leave some comment. I'd like to get some feedback so that I can make it even better.
Julien, what should people check out of yours?
As people may remember from last time, I'm writing and publishing tabletop RPGs, which is my little side gig. In the real life, I work in the video game industry. And this summer, I actually released this beautiful big
Lift that up
book.
A little bit. Cover your face with it for a second.
It's because it's a...
There we go.
This one is a beta version, which I had printed before release to look for typos and such.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the real deal was released in July, and it's like 456 pages of science fantasy universe to explore, only in French for now. I hope someday the base game, the rule book, is actually available in English now. This one, it will take some time before I can get it out in English because that's a lot of words to translate. Hopefully someday it will be also in English.
Well, if our audience goes and checks out the core rulebook, Lore and Legacy, that's on. You can check out a free demo, right? Still on Drive-Thru-RPG.
Yeah, absolutely.
So go do that.
Start guide is completely free.
And I got a quick pick your brain real quick. I recently commented on a picture you had posted, some artwork of Lore and Legacy, but you didn't get back to me to confirm or deny. There was a little image, this little creature you have that kind of looks like a cross between Pikachu and Mikun. Is that character, that little yellow cat rodent sort of character, is that at all inspired by the design of Mikun?
Not exactly, but I love cats. I have 2 cats. I'm a cat person, so I love Mikun as well. And so in my science fantasy universe, it had to have cat-like creatures. So yeah, definitely there's a cat love for sure.
Yeah, maybe something, maybe subconscious, but yeah, definitely. If you're looking for science fantasy, you might look for. I need to play around with you maybe someday of Lore and Legacy in English, and I'll be like, oh, is this Matsumoto? Is this Matsumoto? And you'd be like, I don't know,
one thing
man.
I didn't realize, but people told me, and I was like, actually, that's true. Is that I have elf-like creatures called elfins, but they're aliens, basically creatures, not fantasy creatures, and they are vegetal creatures, and they are non-binary, so they are neither male nor female, but they have long hair and they are mysterious creatures. And I was really trying to play with the archetype of the elf, like forest dwellers and so on. But someone, after the game was released, were like, so basically that's the Amazones, right? And I was like, oh, damn, you're right. In a way, they are. The non-binary Amazones, basically.
Yeah, well, the Amazones are non-binary too. They look like women. It's constantly said in the anime they look like women, but they're not women. Pick up Lore and Legacy and find all those unintentional references.
Yeah, you cannot really. Leiji is always somewhere in my subconscious.
Absolutely. Same for all of us, I think. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the free Arcadia podcast. We're hopefully going to be, like I said, doing this much more regularly. So keep an eye out. Join us live for these recordings at twitch.tv/Captain Hardluck, but you'll always be able to watch the edited version on YouTube. Just look up Leijiverse and we'll show up for you there. Or you'll find Ito's version, so subscribe to both. I don't know. We got to talk about this merger, man. I don't know what it's going to take. Anyways, just kidding. Goodbye. Yeah, money. Hardluck salute anyone? Yeah, there we go. Oh, God. What a train wreck of an ending there, eh?
Sorry about that.
We're good. No.
Bringing back the capitalist life into this conversation. Let's
exactly.
live free under our banner, under the Sea of Stars.
Yeah, mergers might be a bad idea. Somewhere in there I cut out, so it's fine. Somewhere the recording ended, and now we're just doing after show. But